All right. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to this second quarterly fund briefing and donor updates. I have with me Florence and Chris. So before we jump into this, let's give it at least 2 minutes and let us know in the comment section where you are joining us from.
Fantastic, yes. And what the weather is like where you are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
So I'm currently in the Caribbean on a work trip, and unsurprisingly, the weather is not good, but fantastic.
Chris, I'm in Kigali and it's super sunny over here. Hot weather.
Okay,
And
well,
and I'm in Geneva with a heat wave of 35 degrees, feeling 40, and no air condition.
Oh, too bad for you.
okay. For once, the Hamburg residents wins this. Or close call to Kigali, maybe? It's cool. We got Cape Town, Nairobi. Ruth, hi Ruth, nice to see you again. From Brussels. Nami's in Paris. How comes that Europe is having a heat wave after I've not traveled for months and weeks and we only had rain, and now that I'm gone, it's hot, it's warm? That seems unfair.
Yeah, it's a sentence when angels travel.
Maybe I should travel where? London, Geneva. There's some very familiar names. That's fantastic. Julie's from Cape Town. South Africa is pretty heavily represented here. Cameroon. I haven't seen anybody from Asia here so far. Seriously, nobody? Joseph, Lebanon, fantastic. Dara, I'm traveling to Lebanon next month. Hopefully see you there. Ireland, hello Lou, nice to see you again from Ireland. Smitty from Nepal, finally. Finally Nepal. Emma is in New York. I'm also in New York next month, Emma, at Climate Week. Hopefully see you around there. Hello Ruth, nice to see you. I'll get back to your email. Sorry. And Armenia. Oh, fantastic. Okay, it's 1 minute past 8. John, the German in me is getting antsy.
Yeah, so let's get started. Again, wherever you are joining us, we want to say a pleasant welcome to the 2025 second quarterly funding, briefing, and donor updates. So we've done all of the research, we have studied the market, and we are happy to present them to you. Without further ado, Chris, I'm going to turn this over to you with the agenda.
Perfect. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. We have a very limited amount of time, about 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to get straight down to it. What my colleagues are regularly asking us to do here is in half an hour, 40 minutes, summarize all the major funding updates. So that's an overwhelming task. So we're going to quickly talk about the major key donors, some of the global funding trends. We're going to mention AI, and then we're going to talk about the alternatives to grant funding. That's obviously getting ever more important. And then John, I think, will close with some updates from us. That's pretty much what we are doing in the next half an hour or so. Well, I may as well start with the introductions. So can you go one back? There we go. My name is Chris. I'm the Managing Director of MDAT International. My colleague Tony Ann is off poorly today. I hope she's getting better soon. And I'm joined by my very good friend and partner, Florian, who's based in Geneva. And Florian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Chris, and a pleasure being here. So my name is Florian. I'm based in Geneva, and I've been working over a decade now in impact investing space, in the asset management, and then in the capital advisory, and then just recently, together with Christian, we launched the platform Human Planet, where we're really focusing on designing, implementing, structure and implementing impact investing vehicles in all shapes. The company is formerly known as Kois, K-O-I-S, the Kois Advisory Team, but we took it over in a management buyout and basically created and launched Human Planet. In my personal work, I'm mostly looking upstream I don't have the pleasure like Chris being on the ground with the projects. I'm looking upstream in two ways, working with corporates, with institutional investors, INGOs and multilaterals, specifically on bringing projects in, but also then when it goes to fundraising and funding, is this something needed? That's something where my heart lies. So therefore, we are fully complementary here, Chris. You looking down and I'm looking up and meeting us in the middle.
Perfect. And that is what it's all about, us working together upstream and downstream, as localized as possible, but still connected to the global funding theater. Yeah, theater is actually quite a good term. All right, let's go into it. We are a lot of people here today. So quickly, in case you don't know, MDAT International is a social enterprise where what we do is basically we build non-profit organizations by securing funding, developing smarter strategies, building higher performing organizations, and now we're increasingly getting into AI and technical advisory here. The sister and the parent organization of Amsterdam is now Human Planet. Human Planet, as Florian just mentioned, is an organization that came out of COIS, and we're focusing on impact investment and innovative finance. We'll talk about that more in a minute because that's probably the more positive news other than the donors. Okay, we haven't got much time. Let's dive in. John, would you mind going to the next slide, please? All right, let's have a look at the EU. Let's start there. The EU is obviously still a major funding source. So I'm trying to give you a tiny bit of an update here. The competition, unsurprisingly, has gotten even bigger right now. So not much change at the EU from the last quarterly funding update. That's the good news. We still got about 2 billion in ECHO humanitarian funds focused at mostly sub-Saharan Africa, about 470 million on the Middle East. Asia and South Pacific Caribbean gets about 300 million, which is not a lot, and Ukraine mostly, but also West Balkans is about 150 million. So you can see that the majority of humanitarian funding provided by the European Union is based on sub-Saharan Africa. The NDC Global Europe Programming, that is where most development finance comes from right now. It's a pot of nearly $80 billion. That got confirmed last year. That didn't change. It cannot really change with the EU set up that fast. The midterms that they've conducted last year, you may remember from our December update, there was some midterm review, and they really start now shaping the allocations. So it's a year ago that they've looked at how NDC is working. That NDC is that pot of money of $80 billion, and they've made some adjustment, some priorities. They've tightened the geographical alignment, and they've really operationalized this Team Europe approach. So the baseline size remains 80 billion, but we found that the collapse of USAID and the withdrawal of the United States from the world stage in terms of development and soft power really is having not a balancing effect on the EU, but a tightening approach, saying, okay, we are going to tighten on these geographies that we're already good at, and we are not going to attempt to replace what was the largest donor in the world, the US. We also have the Ukraine facility that is now crowding in, and that's a specific one in addition to the humanitarian ECHO one of around 23 million, and that is becoming increasingly operationalized. And the council has confirmed that a fourth payment of around 3 million or so, bringing the total up to about 26 billion euro. So if you do have Ukraine funding, the EU and Germany are now the largest donors and operators there. So what does this mean for you? Very easy. I would really, if you haven't done already, I would really double down on EU readiness. You know, making sure that you got the compliance and the safeguards, the environmental minimum standards, the audit trails for grants and framework contracts. That's really essential. The EU funding is not going anywhere. It may well go down at some point, but it's not going to massively change over the next few years. So doubling down on that EU readiness is absolutely essential. Also, I would really build consortia early, proactively, even before the call is launched. This is the Team Europe consortia approach. Happy to answer any and all questions there. And then what is Florian's world? We get to that in a second, so please just note that in terms of for later questions. Prepare an investable component. Really make sure that you have a component in your program that is revenue active, that can be invested in, that will put you quite ahead of the curve of other applicants, where the revenue logic needs to be feasible, needs to be pragmatic, and there needs to be a role for innovative and private finance. And that increases the chances of your grant application considerably. And just very quickly asking Florian, is in your world of impact investors, do you think investors realize and are they happy to play a role in an EU grant if the revenue line and the outcome framework is realistic?
So the answer is it depends. It depends on the structure. If it's well structured where catalytic capital, the grant, protects senior investors, can be in a fund, can be in an SPV, depends on the structure. There are different ways to do that. But if, let's say, from a financial perspective, the structure is adequate, the proposal is they absolutely are, because it's actually welcome, because the risk reward return adjusts by being protected. That, let's say, the risk is lower just for the investor, and that's absolutely something they can do. Good,
excellent. Now, bear in mind, if you do not have an EU base, you are by and large very much restricted on receiving EU funding. You can join in if you're coming from a third-party country directly, if it's localized in the humanitarian area. Most funds, not all of them, most funds are restricted to a EU implementing partner. So that's makes it a little bit more difficult. You may need to find a partner, or you need to start your own organization in the EU. Right, next slide. And by the way, could you help us put these questions in the Q&A? It really helps us manage it. And my colleague John will, of course, send the webinar around later, so no need to take furious notes. Okay, next slide. Let's have a look at the Germans, yeah. My home country is now the largest single institutional donor in the world. That's not a title that we wanted, but here we are. The bilateral grant space is getting very, very tight here as well, or tighter slightly. The BMZ is falling by a few percent to about 10 billion euros, and the foreign ministry, which is the AA, falls to about 1 billion euros. So you should expect fewer but larger and more selective funding lines. And that is the strategy given also by the new government. The German government has asked all agencies to play through the international and support the international governance system. So a lot of the funding goes towards the EU, UN, and EU, by the way, UN, multilateral bodies. So I would expect a stronger use of EU and multilateral channels aligning with those German priorities. So a much greater emphasis on, again, this Team Europe delivery. This is the counter movement towards the Brexit and what Trump does, getting more multilateral rather than less. And therefore the funding is following that. That's a trend we've observed since Brexit, really, and that is continuing. So again, what this means for you is to make sure you partner across the world, use the EU, use the UN, partner with agencies there in order to apply. There's also a continued and increasing role of loans and blended finance instruments. So again, Florian, your world. Going over there, there's a lot tighter headroom there. So for example, if we look at the KfW, which is the German Development Bank, they use way more loan-based instruments and loan-based operations, making loans in addition to smaller grants. So the total amount of funding didn't go down, but the grant amount went down and the loan amount went up. So again, your projects need to be able to accommodate a loan and a loan repayment to make sure that the KfW, for example, can fund you there. In terms of internal capacity, it's got to be said that the GIZ in particular has some internal troubles. They have the money right now, but the ability to program and commit grants has probably the same as 2024. So that's, increases pressure even more on the GIZ funding. The GIZ, ironically, is only one of the agencies in Germany, but gets the most amount of applications. I think it's probably the best known. Maybe that's why. So again, expect longer delivery times. What this means, I would overall treat grants as scarce resource. Basically a grant is the business model that many of our NGO partners have been operating on for many years very successfully, but these are becoming scarcer and scarcer. They need to be paired and supported by blended instruments, loan instruments, impact investment instruments, private capital, and that shows itself in the donors as well. The rising German multilateral payments can also offset some of the domestic reductions in grant funding. So but you can only benefit from that if you form source shares early enough, certainly before the call is out. So hopefully that helps as a practical tip. Let's move on to the next. We'll have a look at our Anglo-Saxon friends, the US and the UK update before we dive into the other areas. The US is out, as I'm sure you all know. USAID is not coming back. As we said in the last update in March, we obviously forecasted that this then freeze of USAID is not temporary, but a permanent demolishment. And that's unfortunately is certainly true now. The UK aid budget is not by no means out. The UK is still a major donor in the world, but its aid budget has been cut yet again. Remember, it was at 0.7 of GDP. Now it's down to 0.3, and that's a £6 billion annual reduction. That is those bites hit really, really hard. Bilateral aid is falling by more than half, or nearly half. There are major cuts, particularly in education areas. And several country programs the UK has simply closed, which is affecting thousands and thousands of beneficiaries, of course, and it's absolute disaster. The multilateral contributions to the World Bank and the Vaccine Alliance have been maintained, which is seen as a sign that the UK is doing a borrowing from the German textbook of reducing direct bilateral aid and going far more multilateral. So that focus, that what you can do right now is pretty clear. You have to, if you have had a US focus, you probably shifted your focus on EU and DC funding already. The UK still plays a role here as well. If you do target US funds, I would completely focus on humanitarian aid only. I would focus on global health. There's still some funding there and some state-aligned economic support. So we're talking about livelihoods and economic strengthening here. Pursuing more sub-grant agreements with the major implementers, some of which have had severe cuts, but not total cuts. But the pressure here is intense, and it's certainly not a strategy for the future. Again, my number one recommendation and why we started Human Planet and why Florian I'm so pleased that Florian here on the team is that developing a blended finance and outcome-based project delivery way, basically shifting away from the grants-based business model, is absolutely essential if you want to keep your organization going. Good. Let's move on to the next and have a quick look at the UN. The UN is a sad story right now, and unsurprisingly, with US contributions going almost down, the UN is going down. There's a large restructuring project happening at the United Nations right now called UN80, and that positive name sounds at 80 years, by the way, it comes with very deep cuts. They're merging major agencies into 4 core departments: peace and security, humanitarian affairs, sustainable development, and human rights. Those agency mergers, let's call them that, are effectively a result of the budget cut. Now, the World Food Programme has had 30% of its workforce cut. UNHCR reduced its headcount, and of senior posts, they've reduced it by 50%. UNICEF, a UN-affiliated NGO, had a 20% reduction in budget. and they are really scaling back operations. And OCHA, the United Nations Humanitarian Response Program, also had a 20% reduction in staff after a $60 million shortfall. So all that means that WFP is really reducing significantly, which affects roughly about 17 million people in the world. That is pretty hard. And the hardest hit here is Yemen, where about 5 million lose access to food aid via the World Food Program, which is not just morally terrible and disastrous, but also really heartbreaking. The implications for you, us NGOs, are pretty clear. There is going to be a lot less UN-funded subgrants, much higher competition for the remaining contracts, far more emphasis on yet more efficiency, yet more cost sharing, and a shift towards these larger multilateral projects. So what I would do is, again, diversify away. That's really the underlying message of this quarterly update. Go more into the EU, go more into Germany and the Nordics. We're not covering them here today because there's too much to cover. And build your capacity for non-grant funding. And with that, we're entering the first area of non-grant funding, which is a quick look at what's happening in the philanthropic world. So philanthropic funders that's really the good news here. We're experiencing that our philanthropists, our high net worth individuals, our philanthropic corporate schemes, that they are driving for more competition, for more high impact, and for more investment approach. Many of the corporate funds I'm talking to, Florian, this is where you have a ton of network and experience and where you spend your day. So I'd love to hear from you there. But many of the corporates that I speak to on a daily level, they are saying we are borrowing away from a grant more towards an investment approach, which is good because it provides way more flexibility and multi-year support. So it's no longer a 2-3 year grant, but it seems to be like a 5 to 10 year investment strategy. And that's in line with what we see on the hard data. Impact investment surges by 21% year on year. Now past $1.5 trillion. So that's really good news, and something that I think has a trend that's been developing over years that is really hockey-wise scaling up right now. And I would just ask Florian to just give us some input from the trenches, basically from the front line of that world. Florian, is that what you're experiencing, or is it at odds with what you're hearing?
So great question. And I don't know what happened with the slides. Okay, yes. So great question, Chris, because specifically in the impact investing world, we have been historically between two silos. Yeah, between the humanitarian and development world, which is aid-driven, and the for-profit world. Yeah, but since about 15 years, the original niche market of impact investing has been growing, and that is actually where you see the numbers. The 21% is actually something which is specifically happening. Again, it was basically over years doubling each year on a very small basis. Doubling each year on a very small basis. Now this is down to 20% growth per year, which is still not 100%. But it's now into the trillions. And this current situation, actually, where you have ODA money is going down, it's more scrutiny on it. And also that trend goes more into investments and not just providing a grant. That's what we see from a funding scenario, which is actually helping the cause of impact investing. Yeah, because both silos, now the non-for-profit world basically will have to engage with and think about from a continuum of care, how can we not just help on the ground, but actually how we can bring projects forward so that there's a certain level of investment possibility. And the for-profit world, of course, now is able actually to look at some of the investments with a risk-reward return reduction. So the current situation since January, on the change and USAID being wiped out, which is a brutal one and a very disruptive one on the ground, but actually supports the cause of innovative finance. And innovative finance does not only mean that, okay, you put money and I want to have an IRR and here you go, because there are notions in between, because very often it's misunderstood by the people who are working in the non-for-profit world saying, hey, my job is here to help, not to have a financial return. Yeah, and the financial world is exactly the opposite. And that where you have now a lot of nuances in, yeah, where you can have a continuum of care, where the amazing organizations on the ground here, also on the call, can think about actually how can I engage, and support the projects towards a self-sustained path, which has different pieces. In other words, where in the past, maybe innovative finance was too complex, too difficult for an investor, just from a complexity, that actually changes currently because you can use known financial terms and mechanisms and structures, and also from the non-for-profit world, and have different shades of gray between the non-for-profit and for-profit world. Sorry for having a long speech here, but specific, Chris, the notion is impact investing, where the merger of the amazing work and people on the ground supporting marginated populations, difficult to invest in scenarios, and the possibilities to basically bridge it with blended finance, with impact bonds, results-based finance, different structures makes this appealing. So in other words, I will see and foresee the impact investing market to further keep growing substantially as the for-profit market understands, okay, I can actually invest here, and there's a notion to it. And the same is happening now with the learnings on the ground from the non-for-profit organizations to say, okay, I need to think a little bit different. I have to have a long-term view. I have to look at sustainability of projects, where actually a grant doesn't mean it's given there, it's being used and then gone, because some of the grants you can also structure in a way where they actually a revolving grant where they stay in. And so those are the things which are in my mind. So my long answer to you is this piece of impact investing will continue to grow as the for-profit market will adopt innovation from our fields, and as well with amazing organizations and you on the ground.
Very good. I mean, that's really interesting to hear. How do you, let's dive into, after the next couple of slides, let's dive a little bit more into how investment ready the NGOs are to take advantage of this. John, can we just go one slide back before we move on? No, other direction. There we go. Thank you. So as we just heard, the impact investment search is continuing to rise. And I agree with Florian, that is something that has been coming up for a while right now. The good news is as well that there are some foundations which are increasing their giving. MacArthur Foundation, we see other foundations, it's just mentioned as an example here. We see selective foundations responding differently to the US withdrawal and the UK reduction. And there is a rise in what I would call trust-based philanthropy, where they just give unrestricted multi-year grants with the expectation of becoming self-sustainable and financially sustainable within sort of 3 to 4 years latest. And that is a shift in the philanthropic world that I'm seeing towards a more strategic, more value-based funding and capacity building approach. Quite often, by the way, touched with a demand for clear capacity building projects going on the side. So the action points for you would be, again, away from the diversification of the grant-based module, targeting more impact-aligned capital, targeting your offering, make it palatable to high impact, high net worth donors. We get hundreds of emails every day with people asking for general support, and we would genuinely love to help. But what most submissions do not do is give us a investable and actionable project or plan and proposal to our contacts, to our philanthropic and corporate contacts and our impact investor contacts. So a general idea that organizational support, that is probably no longer happening, but the proposal needs to be specific, as Florian says. It needs to be investable, basically. It needs to be a good business case. Now we can move on to the next slide, sorry. So here's, sorry, one more up, John. There we go. So again, with Florian, our top tip here is to stop reacting and really responding more strategically. We've seen our partner organizations, some of them basically reacting and questioning the very core of the DNA. I think what's important to remember is that what you will do, your programs, your mission, your values, they won't change in this. What has to change is your business model. So, and there are, and this business model is certainly going to beyond diversification. So if you are still running a business model that is built for attracting and implementing grants, then you need to probably diversify away. And the remaining grants will have to come from the EU, from the Nordic, from the German, and the philanthropic world. That's pretty much it. And the multilateral, some minor multilateral ones. So that shift from a grant dependency to an adaptable model is going to be the growth factor over the next 10 years, I'm sure. The next one is the technological revolution that's happening in parallel to that. That has nothing to do with your funding per se, but it's so important we felt compelled to mention it here. The AI agents and AI tools for donor intelligence, for proposal development, for impact tracking, for operational efficiency, to free staff, for to be more strategic and relationship building world, that revolution is gathering incredible speed. And the NGO of the future is certainly going to be an AI native one. So there needs to be a plan how you make use of this incredible technology and how you avoid its perils. There's a few articles and resources on the EMSADAN and Human Plan website. I would encourage all of you to approach them. Florian, AI and impact investment and away from grants towards blended finance methods. I mean, question to you, are we ready for all this? Because it gets very fast, it gets very technical, right? Is it all technical, or what is really important here in order to make that change happen from an investor's point of view?
I don't think AI is getting technical, because AI goes in a trend where it's actually even easy. I'm not a techie. Chris, you are not a techie. Yeah,
very true.
But we embrace the usability and the user friendliness and the blessings of AI. Yeah, in terms of the quality of work, the speed of the work, and then also the complexity being well adopted. So that means that our job is still the same job, yeah, but AI tailors to the purpose. So certain headcount processes, certain in terms of overhead costs, certain things AI takes out, and that goes to anyone. Doesn't matter whether you're an NGO, whether you're a financial service provider, whether you're a social entrepreneur or another one. So adopting AI at its stages just makes sense because efficiency increases. That's just to the topic AI.
Yes.
Sorry for that. Pardon me?
No, I just said it certainly does.
Yes, so that's one. The second component is now with traditional aid models they wouldn't cease to exist, but they are much smaller and much more difficult to get. Innovation is necessary. So that means also that for organizations on the ground, that you should look into how to adapt to current circumstances so that I can continue what I'm doing, but I might do it in a different angle.
Right.
And so that also puts, again, on one side pressure, but also we've seen a lot of innovation coming out of that, because any disruption, any crisis, when you go through, it's very hard. But at the end, usually the world is in a better place. That's at least the intention. So those are the things. And that now, and if you then understand that finally you can have a conversation with an investor on a theory of change, which goes along on your work on the ground, that did not exist in the past. And that's the part where I think now people are learning and understanding that collaboration, innovation, and embracing technology might actually lead to a better outcome.
I think therein lies, I think you just said it, Florian. I think therein lies the magic sauce or the key. The discussing the theory of change with an investor, that same conversation you used to have with a donor, you can still have that conversation with an investor. But how many conversations have you and I been in over the last years where we then we are aligned on the mission, the values, even the program that is helping. But then when the investor asks, so, okay, where can I invest? There's just no program. There's no financial infrastructure. There is no clear fund structure. So there's just no business model to receive that funding into. I mean, that's been something you and I have had on a weekly level, right?
Absolutely. When you talk to the financial market, which are rigid, they don't embrace innovation. Yeah. And you see that even in the digital currencies, and I'm not talking crypto, I'm talking digital currencies, digital flow, which slowly has been adapted by the financial markets, and will end up in digital currencies. You don't print money necessarily anymore. Yeah, whether it's tokenized or not is then a different part. But that's the part where innovation is very slow in financial markets.
Yeah.
On the other side, traditional aid models have not changed for ages. Now they're forced to change. And that's why you have if you look at innovation from the aid and development work, plus technology, plus the possibility actually to innovate together with, let's say, private funders, whether they're investors or things that there are different notions about it. Yeah, whether they're institutional, whether it's a governmental space, whether it's foundations, whether it's corporations, whether this is individual, families. All of that now makes a lot of more sense because under the current pressure, people are actually open to understand and look at new paths. And that I find very exciting.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Good. We're coming to the end of this and we're getting to the questions. John, I think you've had some updates as well. Is that correct?
Yes, Chris, let me turn on my video. So thank you so much to you, Florence and Chris, for the presentation, and to our participants. We want to say thank you for sticking around up to this point. We have two updates for you. First is the AI fundraising agent. We are officially launching this in September. So right now the beta version is open. We encourage you to go and start trying it. We have over 200 plus organizations that are benefiting from the beta version. It's absolutely free. All we need to do, just go there, try, experience it, give us as many feedback as possible, because the goal is the quality, the quantity. So we're focusing on the product development and getting feedback from you, embedding them into the product. The next will be our training. We just launched a new training. As you can see it's the impact bonds designed to deliver precisely for NGOs. We encourage you to how to go up on our website, sign up for this training. And if you need a tailored training for yourself or your organization, feel free to reach out to our training manager. Her name is Nicole. It's nicole@mzninternational.com. And she'll be happy to design a tailored training for you or your organization. So with that being said, Chris, we'll jump straight into the Q&A.
Yeah, just one last thing. If you wouldn't mind going back to the update slide for that. That's one. You've missed one there that we obviously, some of you may well know our funding support service that partners with NGOs over several years and strategically develops their business development section, as well as writing proposals and finding opportunities. We've been at capacity for most of this year, and I'm pleased to say that we have at the moment 3 additional places available, 2 to 3 in fact, where we can take up a new funding support partner. So if you're interested in that, then please let us know. And they usually go reasonably fast.
Thank you, Chris. Now let's go straight to the Q&A.
Excellent. The best part.
So the first question, Chris, Chris, are you seeing the questions?
No, you go for it, John.
So the first question says, how can Blender Funders instruments be utilized for less development-focused projects, example, peace building or human rights projects?
That's definitely a Florian question. I can happily answer this, but Florian, that's very much in your world.
So Can you repeat the question, please, John?
How can blended finance instruments be utilized for less development-focused projects? Example could be peace building or human rights projects.
That's a great question. And let's say blended finance, the beauty of blended finance, you can construct it basically on anything, any geography, any theory of change when you are able to invest. It means where you can provide loans, where you can lend money, where you can invest money. Typically, the asset classes in the financial world, you structure that. Now, with the intention of blended finance is to adjust risk, reward, return. So in theory, usually these vehicles are rather smaller than huge, but you have some big ones. Yeah, but again, the answer is, if you are working in fragile setting, let's say, if you are around refugee camps, there are areas and things about maybe energy supply, maybe financial services, maybe the healthcare side, which you can actually see from an investment lens. You can use a blended finance structure. Also, having said that, you can also build it out over time. You can start with some technical assistance to get projects first. Then you can think about, okay, now actually I can start to invest. It would be too risky to invest. I do an impact bond and I finance either the people or the businesses or the projects below by an impact bond. And if this is then actually proven, which we have examples of having a financial return, you can bring that bond forward to be the catalytic layer of a blended finance to then ask for, equity investors or debt investors on top to raise monies. And that is actually the beauty of the continuum of care, where blended finance is a critical tool and it only works with donor money and grants. Yeah. Otherwise, it would not work.
Yeah, I'd just like to say as well that I speak to our NGO partners every day, and some of them are surprised about where we insert blended finance and innovative finance. We've created maternal health impact outcome bonds. We've created humanitarian outcome bonds. Actually, Coyce created the very first impact bond in the world. So that's we have a long history there. We've created a peace development nexus investment facility. We've created an endowment fund for education purposes in India. So all these topics that you would ordinarily do, education, peace, development, health, journalism strengthening, rule of law, whatever, can in many cases, like you said, Florian, be changed to accommodate a impact finance approach. So the easiest thing to do is just to head to the Human Planet or the MZN website, send us a message, we'll give you a call, and within about half an hour or so, we know what the potential is, right?
Good. So moving on to the next question. Chris, this one is from Louis. He said, this person said, if a call for proposal does not mention private sector engagement investable concept, will it still be considered a strength to include in a proposal? Follow-up question. Note that EU proposals are super tight on awards limits, and it is very hard to meet all requirements. So colleagues would be nervous about including something extra. So they want to know the entire thing regarding the proposal. Chris, this is for you, actually.
Yeah, sure. So it makes sense to include something that isn't in the TRRs if it strengthens the TRRs. However, if it isn't included in the ask for what you're applying for, then I wonder if you have been engaging with the EU pre-launch of this call in the market engagement events that they usually do in advance of a major call, and have inserted that as a possibility. So the best way to win a funding line, say from the EU or from any other donor, is to engage with them before the TURs are out, or at least to get intel, say, from us on what the engagement looked like before the TURs are out. There is this famous saying, if you only learn about the call for proposal by the time it's being published, it's likely already too low, and too late, I meant to say. So if you can argue that there is a benefit to that, then fine. You may find that the EU even agrees that there is a benefit to this, but the marking scheme and the application scheme doesn't award points for your very good idea. So they may agree, ironically, and then not be able to credit you for the idea. So again, that early engagement is really important. Bear in mind that once you are shortlisted for a call, say that is the EU again, or the same with the GIZ, getting from shortlisting to award is no longer a question of convincing them that your methodology is right. It's about convincing them that you are compliant, that you navigate the authorizing environment here. And I think that's what many people don't sort of understand, that the valley of death comes between shortlisting and winning, and that is not about the best idea. Otherwise, you have that already. Otherwise, you wouldn't be shortlisted. It's about the authorization environment.
Good. There's a follow-up question from Lou, but before we jump into that one, let's answer this next question. Chris, this is for you. This one say, hello, how can we position our organization to move from short-term project funding to strategic long-term partnerships?
It's a very general question. You do this via extremely good planning. Look at your theory of change. See the problem you're addressing. If you can't address the problem in 4 years, 5 years, then your business plan must match the problem you're trying to solve. And presumably, most problems you're trying to solve are protracted, long-term, and complex. So therefore, your funding must be long-term and diversified / complex. What we can't do, and what the development world has been suffering of in the last 20, 30 years, if not longer, is that we try to squeeze in interdependent, complex problems into 4-year project cycles. And that's never worked, and it's certainly not going to start working right now.
Good. Hope that answered your question. Moving on to the next, Chris, there's another follow-up question from Lou. This person say, would you say impact investing, I think this is for you, Florent, would you say impact investing is becoming more accessible to medium and small-sized NGOs? Do you have any example of where an organization has taken the step and has successfully secured impact investment for the first time as a small or medium-sized organization?
It's a great question. So the answer is a clear yes. And the examples also, there are several ones and they're growing. So the specific thing is, if you are an organization on the ground, and it doesn't matter the size, you have an expertise, a geography, and a theory of change. And if you translate into, okay, what is a horizon? What can I do for them from an investment? Don't think too mainstream investment. Think about sustainable projects. Think about things you can do, when you were in the smallholder farming place, for example. Let me give you an example here. A organization we know well is called For Africa. Yeah. For Africa is actually Africa's biggest homegrown development and aid organization. And it's operating right now in about 8 countries on the ground. And originally it came from a pure aid perspective. In my language, I would say, give people a fish. Then they started to teach people how to fish, actually basically looking education, looking translation, supporting projects, bringing them forward. And then the third phase comes to invest in the fishing business so that you go impact investing. And again, in the same way, initially starting to do pure aid projects, now aid actually in some supportive where you can do certain lending and certain components. And now if you go, for example, smaller farmer, they have created a for-profit entity to specifically look at how to finance smaller farmers in different geographies here too. So you have an example where you start them out from a pure aid organization, but you develop your way into. And the beauty of that is basically, you're not looking at poverty uplift. You look at economic empowerment. Because economic empowerment at the long run will lead to self-sustained wealth creation. And that's the intention of impact investing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Yes.
I think, Florian, you said to me the other day, we were having a coffee over a project discussion, and you said the sentence which stuck with me. It's not about teaching a man to fish. It's about teaching him or her to fish and then investing in the fishing business. And I love that.
Correct. And that is the continuum of care, from helping to support, to train and capacity building, and then to invest.
Great.
Good. We have roughly 12 more minutes to go, so we'll take a few more questions. Chris, this one's for you. So thank you for sharing such a quality report. My question is, with regards to EU, Nordics, German grants and partnership, where can I find those grants in order to apply before the deadlines?
So you can't. Without you need to engage with the major donors. All the major donors are now in Europe. There's just no way around it, other than philanthropists. And unless you are here, you're taking part in the regular committee meetings, you're doing the co-programming, you're joining the market engagement events, that's a full-time job. And that's exactly where our MZN funding support is coming in. We spend our life doing that, and we pass on that information to our funding partnership partners. The amount of engagement work in the donor market in order to secure proper grants long-term is very high, as there is in the impact investing world. You need to engage with these investors. You need to engage with the philanthropists in order to craft a solution and craft your programs together. So what you cannot do, what I think is underlying this question, is wait until a grant is published, apply for it like you apply to a university course in your early 20s or school, and then have an extremely high expectation of passing and accepting. You need a lot of background engagement, and that's only worthwhile if you do this with a long-term perspective. 5 to 6 years is the average length. Most of our funding support partners have been with us for longer than 5 years, and they've seen a constant increase in success. And those who do not have that level of longevity and commitment in this world, they just drop out after 6 months, after 1 year or so. They usually don't see that. So I think that gives, I admit that there is no silver bullet to this, but if you continuously work on something, you will definitely see the success. We have the data to show that it's significantly increasing, but it's, again, not increasing over 6 months' time.
Okay, I hope that answered your question. So now moving to the next, we have this one from Uganda, Nimusima. He said, how can a community-based organization in Uganda maximize fundraising via the MZN AI agents? Chris, this is for you.
So maybe I should say, can you just show the AI website? Oh, wait, actually, if you, John, if you stop the screen share, let me show you rather than tell you. Hang on a second. There, let me just show you my screen to answer that question. So what you simply do is you go to ai.mzninternational.com. I'm showing, can you see my screen, John? Is that?
Yes.
So you go to AI and then you get started here. You can join the WhatsApp community. We are launching this in a 2 weeks time. There's a series of AI agents. We've done this individually. Here's your fundraising agent. Let's go on this one. You see your strategy, your donor research, your grant opportunity scanner that's coming in the next few days, by the way. We called this agent Sarah. That's probably one of the most useful ones, where you can search for opportunities from well over 500 sources. You would never be able to scan those manually. You even have a grant writing agent that helps you with aspects of your proposal writing. Here's an outreach agent, and here's the all-important Ryan, the sector news. So that's just 6 on fundraising. We're launching more and more of these ones, including the communications, content creation, social media management, impact reporting. So we have your theory of change agent, Priya, or your impact reporting agents. The idea behind it, ladies and gentlemen, is that AI is an incredible tool if used right and if used ethically. So the idea here is that we make this available to all small, medium, and large NGOs, but mostly aimed at small and medium organizations, at a price where the idea being that it gives you knowledge, tools, and time that you would normally come only with consultants. And our mission is to build better NGOs and stronger organizations. And fact is, we cannot help and consult with all the NGOs in the world. So we're hoping that the AI agents is a way to do that. And that gives you that routines and makes it a lot easier for you to do work that will probably not have the time or the budget to do internally. So just go, the answer is wherever you're based, whenever you're based, it's 24 hours availability, of course. Go to ai.mzinternational.com, join the community. This is pre-launch. It's still buggy, to be very honest. We are continuously working on it, but this will improve over time. We're in the beta phase, which you can see when you're joining the community here on WhatsApp, where you can give us feedback. We're building these agents together. We're building them with data centrality in Germany, so the data is secure, and there's certain strong ethical guidelines guided here. And we would welcome you to try it out. Basically, we will give the agents for free for a number of weeks, and then we start recovering our costs. But the subscription cost is somewhere between $50 and $150. So it's way lower than that of a consultant. Although, admittedly, not as tailored, not as good either.
All right, Chris, we have a couple of questions, but we do have 6 minutes to go. That question in the chat session. Chris and Florent, with your consent, do you guys have time to answer them?
Yeah, go ahead. Which question?
Okay, good. Let's end the last one, the Q&A. We have James. James said, do donors or donors representatives such as those at GIZ tend to prioritize NGO based in their own country, or are they generally open to supporting organizations on an international scale?
James, the preference is for local. The contracting environment doesn't always allow local. That's pretty much the short answer to your question. If at all possible, there's a commitment by GIZ and all the other donors to go as local as possible, but the administrative reporting and programming capacity of local organizations is often not allowing the GIZ to contract. So we have this thing that the program manager really wants to give this to an organization in Uganda, in Indonesia, or in Colombia. But then the finance and the administrative team of the GIZ comes in and says, no, sorry, we can't do that. So you end up requiring an EU partner. James, I'm glad it's useful.
Okay, good. This one is for you, Florent. Would the alternative funding solution, innovative funders, innovative designs like impact funders, blended, etc., also work for more urgent humanitarian disaster, or are they more appropriate for longer term development scenarios? This one is from John, and he wants to know, Florent.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's say it's more difficult to do in a fragile setting, but it's also possible. Yeah. So again, it depends on the case. Yeah. So again, but the intention is when you do humanitarian action, you relieve pain immediately. That's what you want to do. From an investment perspective, of course, more difficult, but there are amazing organizations doing amazing work which have never thought about investable components, and that could be. It depends on the case. Yeah. So, for example, refugee impact bond, yeah, humanitarian impact bond, which we have done in the sense where that goes into not fully being investable already, but again, it goes in the same direction. But the goal should actually be to have a long-term sustained support. Yeah. So once the pain is relieved, once the crisis is over, yeah, if the earlier you have done something, the better is for the output afterwards. So my answer is yes, but it depends on the case, and it's more difficult to do, but it should be actually done as early in as a fragile setting as possible, so that recovery afterwards goes actually faster and in a better position.
All right, so Florent, thank you so much. I hope that answered your question. We have roughly 3 minutes to go, and we will take a closing statement from Florent and Chris, and we will say we should do that. Chris, over to you.
I just want to say that thank you very much for the interest. We will continue to assist all our partners, NGOs, to navigate these incredible technological and funding channel changes. With Human Planet, we now have really fantastic reach and scale and capacity to harness and develop innovative finance pathways. And I look forward to working with you all to ensure that we are building a better world together, because that's what it ultimately all comes down to. That's really what counts in the evening.
So
Over to you,
from
Florian.
my side, yes, thanks, John. So from my side, it is a fundamental problem is usually a psychological problem. First you make money and then you do good. And that is just not true. Because if you, by making money, do good, that's actually better. So that goes back to the sense also that you talk about the digital divide. Yeah, the rich countries, have it easier to use technology. It is actually the opposite. Yeah, technology has the blessing of access and affordability. And if you're in a situation where you'd have less incumbent technologies actually going against going against it, so you have to disrupt, which is violent, it's very different than to innovate and leap. And therefore, my invitation to anyone here on the call is think about how you embrace technology to leap. Yeah, and that you need a privileged position. And the second thing is think about, while you do good, how to make sure that the beneficiaries you support actually can make money over time.
Thank you, Florian. Thank you, Chris. And to our participant, we want to say thank you so much for sticking around. We couldn't be more proud to have all of the amazing questions that you sent in the comment section. We cannot answer all of them, but trust me, if you send that to us through email, we'll be more than happy to respond to them. And feel free to follow us on all social media and be up to date with all of the latest information. And make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. We send updates every month, all of the resources that we just put in the newsletter and send them to your inbox. Also, make sure you try out the AI product that Chris just mentioned. It's absolutely free for now. Go there, try it, give us as many feedback as possible. And we want to say again, thank you, and do have yourself a pleasant evening wherever you are.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and your interest, and hopefully see you in person soon.